Hello, Brie Anne.
Hi, Angela.
Hi. We know each other, but for people watching who don't know, I'm Angela Espada, the Executive Director of the Indiana Catholic Conference. And can you tell people your whole name and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Brie Anne Varick, and I am the Director of the Office of Human Life and Dignity, which covers a bunch of different ministries, including pro-life activities, post-abortive healing ministry, health ministry, which includes mental health and substance addiction ministry. I oversee corrections ministry and birthline ministry. I think that's it.
That's a lot. And we could probably spend several episodes on each one of those things. But today, you were good enough to come in and talk to us about Catholic social teaching.
Yes.
And I was thinking about this. Alexander and I, the associate director, we spend a lot of time down at the State House trying to inform and influence lawmakers about Catholic social teaching and how it ties into bringing morality into the public space. And the more I started thinking about it, it's like, I didn't become really aware of Catholic social teaching until I started reading about it. And I even asked my spiritual advisor if I was asleep during, grade school and high school, because I did my middle school at a Catholic school, and I went to a Catholic high school, and he promptly asked me how old I was. And said, no, it didn't become really a construct that started going into the mainstream until after I graduated from high school. When do you remember first hearing about Catholic social teaching as a construct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I was thinking about this when we were discussing these, what these questions were going to be earlier. And it is familiar to me. So, and I did go to Catholic schools. I would say I have a trifecta of Catholic schools. So I went to Catholic grade school, I went to Catholic high school, and then I also went to Catholic college as well. So I went to school here at Bishop Chatard High School in Indianapolis, in the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. And I believe we talk about it in our religion classes there. And it was definitely talked about when I went to St. Mary's College of Notre Dame up in South Bend. So I believe it was there as well. I don't know how in depth I went into it because I didn't have a theology degree, but I was definitely introduced to that at some point.
So that's a good thing for people who are young, like you and Alexander, but for older folks like me, you have to kind of pick it up along the way, which is one of the reasons why I think it's important that we talk to, people at the State House, because a lot of them are older than you. And even though they're practicing Catholics, may not have gotten it in the condensed form. Can you tell me how Catholic social teaching informs what you do within your ministries?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's interesting is the title of my office actually is one of the main principles of Catholic social teaching, human life and dignity. Brushing up on this main principle, I think what strikes me the most about human dignity is that it's not something that we can earn, and it's something that's given to us by our Creator, by God, and it's just in our being. So even at any stage in life, even I think we live in a culture where we measure what we deserve a lot by success, and what we don't deserve by failures. And so there's a mentality, I think, in our culture where we have to earn what we get, right? And so, but this is countercultural, which Christianity sometimes is. And
Jesus was a radical.
Yes, he was. And so I think God gave us our rights with creating us in his image. And so that's the principle of human dignity, which John Paul II says is, it's the root principle where all the other principles flow from. And so human dignity, that principle teaches us that we have dignity, we have fundamental rights because of we are created in God's image and likeness.
And I think that's important when we turn people back to focus on Catholic social teaching, the respect for human dignity. Because I think some people are really quick to say, oh, I recognize my dignity, but the respect for all. And, you know, as this is, when we're recording this, this is just, you know, a week after the 4th of July, and we talk about inalienable rights. And human dignity is that. It's something that can't be taken away. It can't be given away because it was given to us by God.
Yes, absolutely.
And the spectrum of that, unfortunately, people like to focus on certain aspects. And as you know, said, you know, St. John Paul reminds us, you know, that everything flows from that. People who are happy about the Dobbs decision, you know, curtailing abortion, giving states the right to curtail abortion. Some people just focus on the right of the preborn. And those same people will be staunch defenders of the death penalty. And we have to keep reminding people that this is a spectrum, that all human life. And with that, there are other things along there. How do we treat, you know, people who are different from us, immigrants? How do we, you know, how do we work to get rid of racism? Because if you truly respect the dignity of someone, you wouldn't feel there wouldn't be a thing as white superiority.
Right.
And so it's a process that we constantly have to remind people of.
Yeah, I think that really going deep into, you know, what is human dignity and really understanding it from the perspective that, and I think you do sometimes need to start from yourself. I think a lot of the struggle of seeing other people's dignity is that we don't see our own. And so I think, because a lot of what I do is healing ministry as well. So really
Can you explain what that is?
Healing ministry? Sure. So I have health ministry. So actually I have a background in nursing. So I am an ICU nurse by degree and was in the ICU for 10 years. And so a lot of my work and my experience is working with the vulnerable sick and dealing with end-of-life issues, actually. And so in my ministry here as Director of Office of Human Life and Dignity, health ministry helps try to have health ministry in parishes. So I help parishes develop a health ministry, and that's sometimes led by nurses or sometimes people who are just passionate about bringing healing to the parish, which can be physical. And I think there has been an emphasis on the physical healing. But coming into this ministry, I really feel like God is wanting to look at the human person holistically, so mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually.
And that's really important after COVID, when people felt isolated and separate. Mental is very important, and spiritual, when people couldn't physically go to church and be with other people. And even though we're, you know, post-COVID, a lot of those feelings of isolation and not knowing how to cope and get back on track still exist for a lot of people.
Yeah, and that is a big repercussion, I think, from COVID, or it really brought to the surface the need for community, how isolation is really hurting people, and they're really suffering. There has been higher addiction, higher alcoholism, higher suicide rates. Children are struggling in schools post-COVID, being locked to screens, not having interaction, and just how important it is that we are able to interact with one another, and not just even through screens, but in person, face to face, right? And so I think after COVID, that really highlighted like the need for healing in all of our communities, and how that's not just physical, but also emotional, mental, spiritual. And so really trying to have opportunities, so creating awareness with mental health and addiction, healing masses, having resources of what counselors are out there. That's kind of what I do to help our parishes really help their people, help priests connect with their people and find them the resource they need to get help, and really just showing the community that the church cares about the whole person, and which is, because the human person has this unique and incomparable dignity.
Yeah. Now, do you find it difficult to impart to people the spectrum of respect for human dignity?
That's a good question. I don't think I do. I think that, I can't tell you that it's always well received, but I think that, you have people on both ends of the spectrum. Those who don't think of the vulnerable unborn, who maybe don't recognize that that a child is a child at conception, and understanding that. And then you have people who maybe think that's the main focus, and then they might forget the vulnerable elderly, and so really I do believe that it has to be both, and you have to once you understand one, that should go deep enough that you understand the full spectrum. And from conception to natural death, understanding that this dignity never leaves us, and it doesn't, again. And I think a lot of people, we look at people's brokenness. I think sometimes, even with the vulnerable unborn, there's an innocence to that. But then, people start to have personalities, and they have successes and failures, and we have our own experiences and our own wounds, our own successes, our own failures. We forget our identity. We forget that we are loved, even if we don't do anything to produce in society, right? Even if we don't have any family, even if we come from broken environments, there is still a God who created us and loved us, and he just created us just because he just wanted us here. There was no reason except for love. And so I think we have to lean into that more to really understand the dignity of people who we see that are different than us, that maybe don't seem to be contributing to society. It doesn't look like, by cultures and society standards, that they're not producing, they're not. And I think because we live in a throwaway culture. Yeah. So if it's not convenient for us, from any standpoint, from the vulnerable unborn to the vulnerable elderly, to people who are different from us, from the homeless to the prisoner, to those who have made, by a lot of standards, terrible choices, but that doesn't mean they've lost their dignity.
Right. So I often tell people you don't have to be Catholic to understand and to believe and promote Catholic social teaching. And so if there are people who aren't Catholic who are listening to this, and I hope that there are a few, at the end of the day, what I hear you saying is, in addition, another word for respect is just love. Just, we were given love, we were made out of love, and so therefore we should love all people regardless of their status, their station, where they are in life, what they've done, how they got to that point. Because, but for another circumstances, that could be us. And we would want and need that love and that respect and that dignity.
Absolutely.
So when we're talking about human dignity, we have to remember respect. Respect for human dignity, no matter what form we come across it in. And I mean, your day-to-day job, like you said, it's in the title. But we don't have to have a job that says, we're, doing human healing and human dignity.
Right.
Because with each encounter that we have with someone, we can show that respect for them. Yeah. And that's something we should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's just your normal interactions day by day. Who does God place in your path that you can meet with respect? And see them in their wholeness, not their brokenness, knowing that they are someone who has been created by God, and they deserve our respect, and they have needs just like we do. Yeah. They need to be talked to, looked at, talked to with kindness, and and we need our basic needs met: food, shelter, clothing, and so just having meet them with understanding.
Yeah. I think that's what you said is really important. See them in their wholeness, instead of seeing the person who is unhoused. While it's important to recognize that detriment so that we can hopefully fix it.
Right.
But don't reduce them to that. See them in their wholeness. See them in all of their human dignity. Well, thank you so much for this conversation.
Oh, you're welcome.
Appreciated it.
Thank you for having me.